Why So Cold contains content that is graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised. Why So Cold relies largely on police or news documents, eyewitness accounts, press conferences, and interviews. Every episode of Why So Cold is produced with respect to the victims, families, and communities involved.
From Watts Creative Studios, this is Why So Cold. Angela Whalen Hudson walked her 2 children to the bus stop in Pelham, North Carolina on September 20th, 2001. After this, she was never seen again. Angela's aunt showed up at the house for the dinner they had planned later that day, but when she arrived, she discovered a half-cooked lunch and Angela had vanished. It had been almost 22 years since that day, and no evidence or trace of Angela has ever been recovered in that time. So, what happened to her? Angela Whalen Hudson was born in Virginia on April 20th, 1968, and grew up in Arizona, surrounded by close family and friends. She left the house when she was 16 to work as a nanny and a babysitter for a few different households. After that, when she was 18, she received training and completed a program so that she could work in a daycare center. Angela had 2 children, but after her marriage to their father ended, she relocated to Danville, Virginia, to be closer to her family. Angela had been through a series of major life issues before her disappearance. In an interview with The Vanished, Angela's sister Melissa Hopkins described Angela as a very sweet person. She liked to have fun. She liked to be with the kids. She was a good person that always seemed to wind up in just really crappy situations. Her primary concern was for her children, and she would go to any length to ensure their safety. Her resolve was put to the ultimate test when she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It was difficult at first, but Angela recognized she had to be there for her children. Bipolar illness, formerly known as manic depression, is a mental health condition characterized by significant mood fluctuations, including mania and depressive emotional lows. Sleep, energy, activity, judgment, behavior, and the ability to think clearly can all be affected by mood fluctuations. Bipolar disorder is a lifelong condition, but by all accounts, Angela was handling her illness well. She was able to recognize when her symptoms became too severe, and she sought help from family members during these times so that she could concentrate on stabilizing herself and working with doctors to get the correct medication. Shortly after relocating to Danville, Angela met Robert Hudson. Robert was a well-known cabinet maker who also happened to be a single father. He was entirely devoted to his children, just like Angela. They became friends and then began dating shortly thereafter. Melissa, Angela's sister, and the rest of her family were kind of skeptical of Robert, despite the fact that the relationship appeared to be off to a promising start. They were supportive of Angela's choices, but because of her history of abusive relationships, they kept a close eye on her whenever she started dating someone new. According to Melissa, Angela seemed to be aware of this because she only told them the good parts of the relationship to avoid any cause for concern. So, by all accounts, when Robert proposed to Angela, her family, they were happy. They were excited at the thought of Angela settling down with a man she loved and providing stability for her children. Of course, Angela said yes. And Angela looked gorgeous in a white gown. She was beaming with excitement, and they were married in a small garden ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Once married, Angela moved to North Carolina to live with Robert in a town called Ruffin. The house they'd be living in was ideal for starting a family, with a shed in the back where Robert could build his cabinets. However, Angela's life in Ruffin quickly turned sour. 2 years into their marriage, Angela informed her family that she intended to divorce Robert and obtain a restraining order. He allegedly was physically and emotionally abusive, and he wasn't the person she thought he was, she claimed. Instead of blaming himself, Robert blamed Angela's children for their marital problems. Angela's family was devastated because yet again, her spouse had failed to recognize and respect her. Angela detailed an event where Robert had confiscated all of the phones in the house to prevent Angela from calling for help. Then he proceeded to attack her. After this incident, she carried an extra cell phone in her purse so she could stay in touch with the people she cared about, one that Robert didn't know about. Robert was oblivious to all this because it was all chronicled in her writings. She then gave her aunt and sister a terrifying warning, telling them if anything horrible happened to her, they'd be able to get the journals and use them as evidence. She knew she was in danger. Despite her reservations, Angela was passionate about bettering her situation. She needed to do everything she could to keep herself and her children safe from Robert, even if it meant another divorce. On August 18, 2001, Angela filed a restraining order against Robert. The court case got off to a great start. Angela was given full custody of her children, and she was allowed to stay in the house until she was able to depart. The judge had told her she could stay in the home for up to a year while she searched for a job and somewhere new to live. According to the restraining order, Robert was sent to live in his son's trailer, which was only about 10 minutes away from the house. Despite this, in an unusual decision, the judge permitted Robert access to the shed. Remember, the one behind the house? Allowing him to continue his cabinet-making business. He was allowed on the land between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Angela and her family couldn't believe this had been granted. Angela had successfully detailed the abuse she faced at the hands of Robert, so much so that a restraining order was granted. So why was he allowed anywhere near her, even under the guise of working? What good was a restraining order if he could still come to the home? As the family walked out of the courthouse, Robert approached Angela with a chilling threat. He assured her, "You'll be out before the end of the month." The only thing left was for the divorce to be finalized. Angela informed her aunt that she had hired legal representation and that they would meet on September 20th, 2001. She invited her aunt over to her home after she had met with her lawyer for dinner. Angela was seen on the morning of September 20th at the bus stop close to her home, waving her children off to school. Her neighbors, who lived at the end of the driveway, saw her walking back inside her home minutes later. Angela's only known plans for the day were to attend her attorney's second divorce meeting and then cook for her aunt, who would be coming over later that evening. Angela's aunt had been attempting to get in touch with her for the last few days just to confirm their plans that evening and see if she needed her to bring anything over, and just to generally make sure that her niece was okay. Her calls went unanswered, and she assumed her phone was broken. When the time came for her aunt to go over to eat at Angela's, she drove over hoping she would explain why she'd been unreachable once she got there. However, when Angela's aunt knocked at the door, she was greeted by her children instead. They said to her they couldn't find Mom either and that they couldn't get a hold of her. They told her that when they arrived home from school a few hours earlier, they said the house was empty. They saw their mom for the last time that morning as she dropped them off at the bus station. Given that Angela's car was still parked in the driveway, this was concerning. There was half-cooked food on the table and the counter, as well as cut-up meat and veggies. Her aunt exited the kitchen and started to casually investigate the rest of the home. Her car and all of her belongings, including her handbag, mobile phone, medication, jewelry, even her glasses, were left behind. Angela's decision to leave her glasses, even though she had an eye condition, seemed really unusual. Without them, she found it difficult to even go out in the sun. She had a history of taking them everywhere. If Angela had left on purpose, she would have wanted to return as soon as possible if her glasses were still there. Angela's house was in a very rural location. Their house was on Highway 700, a rural highway with homes strewn about, farmland, forest regions, big fields. There are twisting creeks and big ponds, and the Dan River to the north of the property. The one store in the vicinity was still a reasonable distance away, but Angela didn't normally walk anywhere, except for the few times she went to that small store to get ice cream for her kids. Danville was also 15 to 20 minutes north. You have to cross over state lines to even reach any community by car. Had she really left that day to meet her attorney on foot? Not knowing what else to do, her aunt called the police. When the detectives arrived at Angela's house, her aunt informed them of the situation. They knew Angela had been seen dropping her children off at the bus stop, and they knew she had plans to meet with her attorney that day. But they quickly find out she didn't make it to that appointment. Investigators questioned everyone who lived in Angela's neighborhood, and 2 neighbors claimed to have seen her walking home that morning. Their assertion was supported by the half-cooked lunch in the kitchen. Shortly after Angela arrived, the pair noticed Robert approaching the house, but neither of the witnesses saw Robert or Angela leave. Investigators then questioned Angela's relatives and friends, particularly Robert. They interrogated Robert first because Angela's return coincided with his authorized hours in the shed. Angela returned home around 10 a.m. and allegedly went to see Robert in the workshop, telling him that she wanted to do something and then left the property on foot in violation of the restraining order, according to Robert. Investigators suspected something was referring to her upcoming meeting with her divorce attorney, but she didn't show up. Of course, whether this encounter happened or didn't happen in the way Robert said is entirely up for debate. Melissa, on the other hand, was quick to report Robert's alleged abuse, the divorce meeting, and Robert's threats against Angela in the courts to the authorities. The investigators, to her dismay, were uninterested in her concerns. Melissa was questioned about Angela's physical and mental well-being. Melissa made the mistake of telling them about her sister's bipolar diagnosis, which she now regrets. Melissa told the Vanished podcast that the other detective asked her about medications and stuff, and she told them where they were in the house and that she had fibromyalgia and that she was bipolar. She also mentioned that she literally to this day still feels such guilt for saying that because she saw him literally close his notebook and take no further notes. After Angela's bipolar diagnosis was disclosed to the police, they immediately shifted the investigation from a missing person to a runaway. Angela had never disappeared like this before, and like I mentioned earlier, when her symptoms were bad, she communicated with her family that she needed support. Why would this time be any different? After questioning everyone, investigators informed Angela's family that they would monitor her Social Security number for activity every few months, but as they classed her as a running away on her own accord, they couldn't investigate any further. It's not illegal to up and leave, but for Angela's family, the news came as a blow. Robert would not be subjected to any further searches, inquiries, or tests. Regardless of Angela's attitude or circumstances or whatever her family said to persuade the investigators, they were positive that her absence was due to her bipolar disorder. Angela's family was left speechless, outraged, bewildered, and heartbroken. They knew Angela had not gone willingly, and it was now their responsibility to figure out what had happened to her. Angela had no need to flee. She was in the process of changing her family's life and would never leave her children behind. The strangeness around her disappearance did not sway the police, but you have to ask, why would they think someone would cook a half a meal before leaving? But because the police refused to class her as anything but a runaway, no searches were done. Her home as the suspected crime scene was not preserved as it should have been, and any evidence that could have been there was lost. Angela's aunt took the 2 children with her, and it became clear that she was missing. Angela was a woman who lived for her kids. According to everyone who knew her, they would say the same thing. Even while she was struggling with mental illness, she always put their needs first. First and foremost, she had a restraining order against her husband, and no one who knew Angela believed for a second that she would leave the house, knowing that her children would return home from school that day with just the man she had the restraining order against to care for them. No one could understand what was really going on. Melissa told the Vanished podcast, Robert could not stand her niece. He actually told them that she was the whole reason that his and Angela's marriage didn't work. So why would you leave your children in that sort of situation? She also said that when she went to the home, Robert said he didn't want anything to do with Angela's children, telling her he was not responsible for them and he was not paying for them. Melissa also stated that she caught him contradicting himself, saying to someone that Angela had left in the car. A few days after Angela had vanished, Melissa and her younger sister went to Angela's house to collect her belongings. This included the journals Angela had mentioned that would be needed if anything happened to her. To their surprise, someone was in the house. Robert's adult son greeted them at the door and welcomed them inside. They proceeded about the house, taking Angela and her children's belongings, including a large journal that belonged to Angela, while Robert was apparently out of town. It was full of poetry and artwork, but some of the pages had been pulled out. What was on these pages? Did the missing pages contain vital information about Robert? The information Angela said they would need? According to Melissa, there was a massive, deep freezer in a sunroom off of the kitchen. The women were blocked from entering the room by Robert's son. He informed them that Angela's belongings weren't in there. They thought this was unusual that he wouldn't let them into the room. He even stood in front of the doorway the entire time they were there. They were then given access to Robert's shop in the back, which included the room where he was cultivating marijuana plants. But according to Melissa, while they were there, they were searching, Robert's son again made sure to guard another doorway, this time to the room with a collection of large saws. Melissa was so disturbed by the visit that she immediately contacted the police, and she was assured that they will investigate. Melissa has mentioned that she has felt her calls to the police department have been ignored, and the fact that the detective assigned to the investigation has been unable to discover any new evidence. The impression of being ignored has persisted over time. They were told repeatedly that a search would take place, but it never did. Angela's best friend made an unexpected phone call to her 15-year-old daughter a week after she vanished. The friend reassured her that she was fine. She'd just talked to her earlier that day. The call surprised Angela's daughter, who immediately informed the rest of the family. Both the woman's identity and the exchange were reported to the authorities. They took no action. Melissa told the Vanished podcast that around a month to 6 weeks after she went missing, she was told that Robert had either sold or given Angela's car to her best friend at the time, the same best friend that supposedly made the call to Angela's daughter. What Melissa and the rest of the family can't understand is why. If Angela's husband and best friend assumed had simply walked away and she could return at any time, why Robert would give Angela's car away? Why was Angela's best friend not more concerned about her disappearance? It's likely that Angela would have confided in her about the abuse, the divorce, and the upcoming court cases. So why would she be happy to take possession of her car at the hands of her abuser? According to Melissa, she later found out that Angela's best friend had dated Robert prior to him meeting Angela, and once Angela disappeared, the pair began dating again. Was Angela unknowingly tied up in some messy love triangle? Had Robert and her best friend secretly plotted her disappearance behind her back? Melissa has been told that Robert was interviewed twice by investigators, and that each time he was requested to undergo a lie detector test. However, the current investigator on the case, with whom Melissa has an excellent working relationship, has been attempting to set up an interview with Robert's adult son, and each time he's declined. But she's been warned that he cancels or fails to show up for every appointment that they make. She's also attempted to speak with her best friend again, but she refuses. She currently resides in neighboring Danville, while Robert still lives on the property that Angela allegedly fled last year. In 2017, Melissa and her husband returned to North Carolina to meet with the police, as well as to see Robert and try again to speak with her closest friend. Melissa added that during this meeting, all Robert seemed to do was try to throw the finger at Angela's friend, suggesting that if they want to know the truth, they should talk to him. Angela's friend was adamant about not speaking to them. Angela's daughter stayed in North Carolina to continue school when their mother vanished. Angela's son was raised by Melissa and her husband. Angela's family have been pretty adamant about keeping their children's names out of the media, so of course, I haven't included them in this podcast. Angela's home has been remodeled in the years since she disappeared, so there's no chance of any remaining evidence being there. Robert's workshop has been burnt down twice. In the case of Angela Whalen Hudson's disappearance, no coordinated searches, suspects, theories, persons of interest, or warrants have been issued as of today. Melissa has repeatedly contacted the sheriff's office, but has received no response. She told The Vanished in 2018 that she had had no responses to her emails since 2010. Despite this, she maintains hope that she will learn the truth about her sister's death. Robert and his children were afraid that Angela would take the house in the divorce, despite the fact that he had told Melissa she didn't want to. So they did something to make her disappear, according to her theory. Despite their anger and frustration, Angela's friends and family know that what they're fighting for, a loving, energetic, nurturing, and ambitious young mother who would do anything and everything for her family. Time has failed to erase Angela's memory, and she lives on in her children and family who are still fighting hard for her justice. On the 20th anniversary of Angela's disappearance, Melissa expressed her unhappiness on Facebook, stating that Robert Hudson had close contacts in the local sheriff's office, and this is why there was never any comprehensive investigations. She emphasized how wonderful Angela was and how much she meant to everyone. Angela has now been missing for over 21 years. She is described as 5'7", white, with blue eyes and blonde hair, slim figure. Angela has a red scorpion tattoo on her back, a Chinese dragon on her upper right shoulder, and an Egyptian hieroglyph on her right ankle. If you have any information about Angela Whalen Hudson's disappearance, please call the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office at 336-634-3238.
This has been an episode of Why So Cold. For the source material used in this episode, visit whysocold.com.